Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending and for your patience and understanding as we have been addressing the many challenges associated with the start of our season for the 2021 WHL season. We are very excited to announce yesterday that our regular season will start on Friday, January the 8th. That is a firm start date, not a tentative date. And as we continue to work with the various governments and health authorities within our jurisdictions, on some of the final touches, I guess, if you will, and other issues that we need to address with them. We will continue to do that in order to finalize details around our schedule. We're making very good progress. Our health and safety protocols have been well received, but there are, as everyone is well aware, we're at different stages in different provinces and states within our region, and we're going to need some additional time to work out some of those details before we can release information on our actual schedule for the season. We are excited to have all of our players returning to our locations after Christmas to begin their training and final preparations for the season, including some exhibition games leading into our opening game on Friday, January the 8th. And we'll have some additional information to you as soon as we can. We envision right now that we'll probably be mid to late November before we can announce more details on our schedule. In addition, we're very, very pleased to add to our team Dr. Duran Naidu from Edmonton. Dr. Naidu was the Chief Medical Officer in Edmonton for the NHL Hub, and we're looking forward to getting his expertise and learning from the experience the NHL had in Edmonton, and also getting his assistance with our discussions with the health authorities in each of our jurisdictions. So we look forward to your questions today, and again, thank you for attending.
Thank you, Commissioner Robison, for doing this. I guess the first thing, I know you say more details will be coming out about the schedule, but under normal circumstances, it would probably leave you somewhere around 35 to 40 games if you're going to end the season when it normally would. Is that kind of what you're looking for to achieve with the January 8th start date?
We have a start date of January 8th and a concluding date of May 2nd. So that will actually allow us to play a maximum of 50 games during that period of time. The number of games will be determined as we work our way through the next number of weeks, but we can play up to a maximum of 50 games.
And if I'm allowed a second question, I'll just ask, I can't remember what the exact date was when we spoke with you last, but I believe the statement from you was that you were looking to have somewhere near 50% capacity seating in the stands if you were going to start the season. Is that still the goal you're looking to achieve?
That's our objective, but we recognize that ultimately that'll be determined by the health authorities through our discussions with them, and those discussions are ongoing, and we're looking forward to getting some clarification on that soon. But the number may be significantly lower than 50%, just given the health restrictions that apply in various provinces and states currently.
Hey, Ron, how you doing? Hey,
Hi.
I guess one of the things you're working through in BC with the BC division is the cohort situation in phase 3 of the return to play here, meaning the 5 teams will have to be separated into cohorts of no more than 4 teams, which means they'll have to be broken up into groups of 3 and 2, and then a 2-week quarantine break until they move into new cohorts. What's that? Have you talked to the teams? They're going to have to play each other 8 or 9 times straight in the two team cohort. How odd is that going to be? And is it just one of the things there's no getting around?
Well, it's a good example of where the current position of the government is and health authorities in BC. We are going to allow additional time. Of course, we have a little bit more time to work with respect to what that might look like when we begin in January, and we're hoping to make some progress in that area with the BC health authorities. But in the event that cohort position is still in place in BC, then we will have to adapt to that, and then that will dictate to some extent what our schedule will look like.
Thanks, Ron. Can I just sneak in a question about a vaccine? The consensus is there'll be one by the end of the year, and likely by middle of next year it will be widely available. Might not affect you in this 2021 portion, but in the fall, are you going to have a requirement? What you've seen in the queue happening? Are you going to have a requirement that every player must be vaccinated in order to play in the league?
Well, that'll be one of the items that we'll be discussing with our new chief medical advisor. Again, we don't know what the timing of the vaccine would be and whether that would be something that we'd contemplate to be mandatory or not, but we'll consult with the health authorities and with our chief medical advisor on that matter.
Hi, Ron. Thanks for doing this. I'm just wondering about things like travel and hotels. Maybe players can't stay in the same room. Maybe they got to be spaced out more on a bus. Is that going to lead maybe to more buses and elevated costs? Is that a possible, impact of all this? I know there are probably still things to plan, but I know talking to teams in other leagues, they've really worried about extra costs from travel and accommodations.
Well, it's a good question. We haven't got into the details yet of our schedule, but we're certainly going to try and minimize, first of all, overnight stays, reduce that to the extent that we can. And one of the things, as you're aware from the release, is that we've taken steps already to realign the league into 4 divisions. Some of the divisions are already in place, but we've moved Swift Current into Saskatchewan and to the East Division, so that we have the provincial boundaries will be as far as we go with respect to travel, and that's really designed to try and minimize the risks associated with interprovincial travel and so forth. So we are also going to, again, as I mentioned, look at how we can minimize the number of overnight stays to avoid hotels and avoid those types of situations during the course of the season.
And also the dates you're looking at here, is the plan to have a full postseason, like the same playoff you've always done in the past, at least with the number of teams?
We haven't even got to discussion on playoffs yet. Of course, that'll depend on the Memorial Cup and the staging of the Memorial Cup and the ability for us to have full senior conference playoffs with the border opening and so forth, whether that will be in place at that time. We're going to have to make that decision later on in the season. And so we haven't really determined what the playoff format would look like, if it would be the traditional 4 rounds of playoffs or whether we would have divisional play only at that particular stage. So that'll be something we'll determine at a later date.
Thanks very much. Hi, Ron.
Hi there.
I'm assuming you get plenty of feedback from the teams on just what they're dealing from a financial standpoint, but how concerned are you about the teams kind of making it through this pandemic? And is it possible, is it possible that we could see some teams, I don't know, take a break, fold? What do you think?
Well, it's a very difficult circumstances that we find ourselves in. From an ownership perspective, I admire their commitment to the players to get the season started and to work our way through this. But there's going to be significant financial losses for all of our clubs, without question, because we know that we're going to be dealing with limited capacity far lower than what we normally are accustomed to, and that will cause some challenges. I don't believe we're at risk of losing any franchises, but it will be a difficult situation for our teams to work their way through.
Hey, Ron, thanks for doing this. I'm going to change the subject like I did 3-4 months ago and ask if there's any update on the Winterhawks ownership you can give us, and specifically, have any offers made it to the Board of Governors, or have they all been dealt with receivership?
The matter's still with the receiver. We wish we were further along, quite frankly, in that area. But we're hoping that we'll make some progress very soon and be in a position to have a new ownership group in Portland. And that's our objective, is to make it happen as quickly as possible. Have there been any viable offers that you're aware of, or how many serious offers have there been in the last, whatever it's been, 6 months? Yeah, there's been several offers made. There's been groups expressing strong interest, but just haven't reached the level that we need in order to qualify as owners within the Western Hockey League for a variety of different reasons. COVID does present challenges as well, of course, as we're well aware, and that has probably more than anything contributed to the delay. But we're optimistic that something will happen here soon, and we're looking forward to having a new ownership in place in Portland. What happens if nothing happens before January, the start date? Well, the responsibility is currently with the receiver to ensure the club continues to operate and we're working very closely with the club and their management to make sure that there's no disruption in the Winterhawks franchise.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm just wondering, the East Division kind of presents an extra challenge in the fact that it does have the interprovincial travel. So what's the talks been like with the health officials in those jurisdictions in Saskatchewan and Manitoba?
The health officials in Saskatchewan and Manitoba have been very positive, very cooperative, very respectful of the position we find ourselves in with only 2 teams in Manitoba. Of course, they are isolated somewhat and would need to play interprovincial games with Saskatchewan. That's one of the areas that we're working through, and is one of the reasons we can't be in a position today to announce any details on the schedule, is that we still need to obtain approval for the interprovincial travel between Manitoba and Saskatchewan. We're at different stages in our discussions with each of the health authorities in those provinces, but expect a decision on that soon so that we can move forward with scheduling games with one division, East Division, including teams from both Saskatchewan and Manitoba.
Excellent. And was this start date in January kind of meant to coincide with the end of World Juniors so teams don't have to kind of worry about their players moving to and from different places in that bubble in Edmonton?
No, not really. It was really arrived at in large part due to the fact that we just felt, for a number of different reasons, that it was the right date to start. The health authorities were concerned about movement of players in before Christmas and returning home over the Christmas break, and how that might lead to more exposures and so forth. And that was one of the considerations. But I think when we looked at it, it just made sense to bring the players in, keep them with the teams for the entire season, and not have them moving back, if you will. So we have them in a more controlled environment with our teams for the balance of the season.
And it might be too early in the process here because you just announced a start date, but we've seen it at the NFL and stuff, what happens when someone on the team tests positive. Has there been a decision about what will happen if a player on a WHL team tests positive during the season?
Our protocols address all of that, and we'll be prepared for that. I think, as we've witnessed in the Quebec League, that the virus does come certainly occurs from time to time, and we're going to have to address that, and we'll be prepared to adjust the schedules and to isolate teams as required as we work our way through that. But our protocols do address what steps we take in the event that a positive test occurs.
Hi, Ron. My question is, if there are some jurisdictions that say that fans would not be allowed in a rink, or would those owners in those jurisdictions still be in favor of going forward? And related, if you have some situations where certain jurisdictions are creating significantly more revenue than others, do you have a system where you might have to engage in some sort of revenue sharing?
First of all, on the question of, I guess we're going to see what those jurisdictions look like. I can tell you that in each of the 6 jurisdictions in the Western Hockey League, they're all at different stages, all have different caseloads, and we monitor that very closely. That's something we'll take into consideration as we move forward in the decision making as to what the season will look like. We've had discussion around the maximum number of games and the minimum number of games teams would play under those circumstances, but it's a little premature for me to comment on whether or not how that's going to play out. We're optimistic, based on our discussions with the health authorities in all locations, that we'll get their full cooperation. Whether we'll have spectators at the end of the day, I'm not sure, but certainly they understand that we're a spectator-dependent league, and that revenue stream is extremely important to our teams. As far as revenue sharing is concerned, no, we're dealing with it more on a jurisdiction-by-jurisdiction basis. We'll be asking for support in those centers, in those regions, or those provinces or states where we are not getting the capacity that we need to keep our teams in a position to be viable. And we're working through that on a province and on state-by-state basis.
Hi, Ron. Thanks for doing this. My first question is similar to the BC cohorts. Alberta, I'm sure you know, has a cohort of 50 with a 14-day non-participation period. One thing we've been seeing with some of the leagues from out here is sort of series play. So 2 teams play each other for a couple times over the course of a week or two. then take a 14-day practice break, essentially, where they can't compete, and then do that with another team. Is that something that the WHL has considered?
Well, we've expressed our concern to the health authorities on those restrictions. It makes it difficult for us to schedule into those on that basis, and I think there's some movement to give us some more flexibility, if you will, in that area. And I believe there'll be an announcement soon in that regard in Alberta. So we do need some additional flexibility in order to accommodate our scheduling. It's somewhat unique, as well as the scope of our teams, the number of people that travel with the teams, to the number of personnel, officials, minor officials, etc., that have to conduct games. So our situation is a little unique in that the scope of our league is maybe much different than certainly minor hockey or other levels of the game.
And is the current plan then to have the schedules exist in these specific division by division? Is that like ironclad, or is there a potential that, before you announce a season, it could open up to be East and West?
No, we've committed to the entire regular season being played within the provincial boundaries. So in the case of Alberta teams, they will play exclusively. The 5 Alberta teams will be exclusive for the entire season.
And then I guess my last question is just looking at the QMJHL, what have you taken away from what you've seen from them so far in terms of what you can apply in terms of safety protocols and that sort of thing?
Well, we're in constant contact with the Canadian Hockey League and, certainly directly the Quebec Major Junior League as to how they're managing through different circumstances. We have compared protocols in preparation for the season. We are certainly learning from how they are addressing different situations in their league, especially as they work through not only positive tests with certain teams, but also the various heightened areas of concern in red zones and how they've been able to respond to that. So that's something we all have to be prepared for and adjust if need be, if that does occur in our particular region.
Hi, I know the question I have right now, I know we've kind of touched on it already, but what happens if fans aren't allowed to watch the games in the arena?
Well, that will be a decision ultimately that's made by the health authorities, and we will have a streaming service available for all the games, so the games will be broadcast and available to everyone in the event that we're not able to accommodate spectators.
Mm-hmm. And again, I apologize if I missed this before, but I know in Quebec, the province was able to give some money to some of the teams. Is that something that the WHL is looking at in the different provincial and state governments?
Well, we won't be making a request for funding unless our capacity for spectators is lower than we anticipated. We have set some objectives for that, and it's all dependent upon where we land with respect to the health authorities and what would be permitted in that jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm. In terms of, I know you're undergoing discussions with public health officials, but what are some specific COVID-related issues that are really that are being stressed right now?
Well, I think all of our protocols are being scrutinized. There are unique features to each province, each state that we're dealing with as to how we tailor it to that jurisdiction based on their requests. So we'll have probably 6 protocols at the end of the day that will address any of the unique features that the health authorities in each of those jurisdictions would like us to include. So we haven't really focused on anything in particular. Certainly items like how do you manage positive tests? How do you envision with screening and a number of those different areas in protocol. We have a very comprehensive protocol with a new chief medical advisor who's continually reviewing that and dealing with the health authorities on it. So I think the only thing from a health and safety perspective, I think the health authorities generally are very comfortable with what we have developed and the approach we're taking. The real comes down to what degree of spectator capacity would be acceptable in each of the jurisdictions.
Okay. And just, I think my last question here is, just God forbid this happens, but is there potential, or sorry, depending on how COVID kind of transpires, could the season be canceled if something happens and the situation gets worse?
Well, I guess anything's possible. We can't predict what the future might hold with respect to the virus. We certainly hope and anticipate that we'll be able to complete our season in full and get our full regular season games in and play playoffs and potentially Memorial Cup. But that's all going to be dependent, of course, on how this virus progresses and whether it's manageable for everybody concerned at some point.
Ron, independent of what the Memorial Cup does, is your intent to crown a WHL champion through playoffs?
Well, really that will come down to whether we're the border opening or not. The U.S.-Canadian border issue is significant because we have 5 U.S.-based teams, as everyone's aware, and to develop a full playoff with all 22 member clubs involved, we'd need to have the border open for that purpose. So in the event that we're not successful in the border opening and there is a cancellation of the Memorial Cup, which we hope doesn't happen, we would have to come up with an alternate format for playoffs, which may include declaring 4 champions within our divisions. But that's not something we've contemplated at this stage. We're hopeful that by May that we can play 4 rounds of playoffs as we normally do, and then head to Ontario for the Memorial Cup in June.
A couple questions for Ron. Firstly, kind of similar to people have asked about with keeping an eye on the QMJHL. Just curious as to if you also keep a close eye on what's happening in Ontario with Lisa McLeod's comments in regards to OHL can't start unless they cut down on body contact, and B, just what the provincial and 2 state jurisdictions are doing in regards to returning back to hockey with their junior A leagues like the SJ or the MJ, for example.
Yeah, well, first of all, we are in constant contact with the OHL, the Quebec Major Junior League, and other leagues. Quite frankly, the NHL have been very helpful, and we're in discussions with all of the leagues in North America on a constant basis to see if we can learn and certainly stay in touch with them on some of their challenges as they look to reopen as well. And sorry, your other question was?
Just in regards, you kind of answered it already. It was just in regards to the MJ and the SJ, but I think you kind of answered with just talking with the other North American leagues.
We also monitor what's going on at the other levels of the game, whether it's junior A hockey or midget hockey, and watch to see how they're doing and how successful they are with the start of the season.
One other question, and I'm assuming this will be something that will be announced or still being worked on. Just you mentioned hoping to have all the players there after the Christmas break. How much, when regards to import players coming back, or also players crossing the border, is that still something that's still being discussed here as you're getting all the jurisdictions in place?
Yes, with regard to U.S. players and import players, we are working with the Public Health Agency of Canada on how we will manage their entry into Canada, and hopeful that we'll have some news on that very soon. But we are having to work through a process there, and that is also involves making sure that we have the protocols approved in each of the provincial, with the provincial health authorities in Western Canada.
Ron, you're obviously dealing with a wildly fluid situation here. You're 3 months out from a potential start date. Can you explain to me how the first 2 dates were aspirational and this one's a hard date? What's the thought process there?
Well, we just felt that at some point we needed to create some certainty around the start of the season, and we had announced already, as you mentioned, 2 tentative target dates, if you will. This is not a tentative date. This is a firm date. We are going to start on January 8th, and we're pleased and excited because our players will be able to return to our teams and right after Christmas and get started with their training with their teams and preparation for the start of the regular season. So yeah, we're looking forward to it. We felt we just really needed to take the next step and put a firm date in place for the start of the regular season.
Is there a drop-dead date that the Memorial Cup has to be played by?
We have scheduled the Memorial Cup right now for middle of June, start of middle of June. So we backed it up essentially 1 month to give us more time and more runway to work with, if you will, to play our regular season in. But that determination on the Memorial Cup and playoffs, quite frankly, will be done in consultation with the CHL.
Just one last one. Have you thought about letting your players go to Junior A if they want to?
No, we haven't at this stage. They seem to be doing well in their locations right now. We've said from a point of view of their own health and safety and education, we think it's important to remain at home during this period of time. And that's another one of our considerations for looking at the January start was from an academic point of view, it just lands a little bit better for the players than say an earlier start in December or earlier than that. So we really have not, at this point, we've allowed players to train and practice with the Junior A teams, but not play games. But we'll be looking at this, as you mentioned earlier, it's a fluid situation, and it's something that we'll have further discussion with our general managers on as early as next week.
Hi, I'm just wondering, within each division, will there be a hub location to cut down on travel and risk of infection, even within provincial boundaries? What will that look like?
No, we will not have a hub. We will be playing, we may have, in some jurisdictions, consider playing more double headers or more back-to-back games, those types of things. But no, the games will be played in each of the centers, and we will not be utilizing the hub concept.
When it comes to finances for the teams, do the clubs currently get a cut of the revenue from the online streaming packages? And how is that done? Does it all go into one pool and split up 22 ways, or is it based on fan support, the size of the fan base for each team?
Well, historically, what we've done, Guy, is the clubs receive the revenue that they're generating through the subscription program. So whatever audiences they're generating, they're benefiting from that revenue. It's not significant, but it certainly helps offset the cost of production and allows us to provide a service that's very, very important, especially to the families and our fans who follow the games regularly. And it would be even that much more important, of course, this season with which looks like restrictions on the number of fans that can attend the games.
Teams need the income, but fans have less income to spend on online packages right now. So how do you balance those two realities?
Well, we're working hard to try and deliver as good value as we possibly can in terms of the pricing of these packages are concerned. So I think that, the whole intent is our games are family affordable, our broadcast should be family affordable, and we're working to accomplish that.
Last one for me is on the other side of this pandemic, and hopefully we get there sooner as opposed to later, but could any of the current changes that you're making to scheduling the interdivisional play, and could it carry over to once we're on the other side of this, just because teams are still going to be reeling from this financially? So to cut down on travel, could you see no interconference play for a season or something like that?
I think we would like to revert back as quickly as we can to our normal schedule, if you will. I think we all have, I think our teams are real comfortable with that format, and that would be our desire. But again, that'll be dictated by where we land next season and what it looks like. Hopefully we'll be beyond at that point in time the virus circumstance, so we can look at it objectively and make a decision that's in the best interest of the players and of the league overall. But we certainly understand why we're doing it this year. I think it's the right thing to do to restrict travel and to manage it within our respective provincial and state boundaries.
Other leagues, other junior leagues have a pay-to-play format where, sometimes it could be player fees of $10,000 for a season. That's the case here with the junior club out of our city. Was this ever explored? How far down the road did you get there? And is this, something that could be looked at?
No, the WHL is responsible for 100% of the player expenses with playing, and that's the arrangement we have with our players, and we intend to honor that. And it's not as if we haven't explored different options, whether it's preseason training and a variety of different options. But we have a commitment to the players that we've made through our standard player agreement. We intend to honor that, and that's the model that we have. And that's one of the reasons, quite frankly, that you have to admire our ownership through this, is that they have, despite the challenges of virtually no revenue, prepared to move forward with the season, and that's pretty commendable when you consider that we have a different model completely where we pay 100% of the expenses for the players.
All right, that leads me into my next question about the owners. It's going to be a challenging year from an economic standpoint here around the governor's table. What's the resolve like to say, hey, we might have to really eat a lot of expenses here without revenues this upcoming season?
Well, they've made it very clear that they're committed to the players and their development, and despite the fact that attendance will be minimalized and revenues will be limited, they are prepared to meet that commitment and move forward. And I think I think it's a strong statement to be made under these circumstances. So we're moving ahead, and I think it's safe to say that we got to admire the resolve and the commitment from our ownership through this very difficult period of time.
I have a two-part question. The first part of my question is usually within about 3 weeks of the start of the regular season, the teams have to make decisions on their overage players. So the question there is, do we have a new date for that? And the second part of my question is that on January 10th typically is the trade deadline. Is there a new date set for that?
You asked some good questions. We're working through all that, and that's one of the reasons we need a little time to get our season started, is that not only are we waiting for some clarification in some cases from the health authorities, we need to work through some unique changes to our regulations, and that'll be a discussion we're going to be having with the general managers and in the coming weeks in order to finalize. But there will be an adjustment to the dates such as January 10th, where it's a cut down date for rosters and so forth, would have to be changed because of the start date of our season and those sort of things. The other thing we are doing is we're going to minimize the number of players we bring in for training camp or training prior to the start of the season as well. And so we're addressing all those issues now with the general managers now that we know what our start date is.
Hi, Ron. I was just curious about testing protocol and who will be tested and how often, or where you are with that plan. For example, will billet families, I assume, need to be involved somehow in that? And just, again, you're probably a fluid situation, but where are you with that right now?
Yeah, part of that is, Paula, we have to work through each of the provincial and state health authorities to establish what that actual protocol is going to be. Secondly, one of the reasons we wanted to bring on a chief medical advisor at this time is not only to work with the health authorities on what that actual protocol will become, but to determine things such as testing and whether or not that's going to be required at any particular stage. We have a pretty extensive screening process that we'll go through, but we haven't landed on what our actual testing requirements will be. Certainly the players will be tested prior to the start of the season, and if they show of any symptoms at any time, will be tested immediately and isolated if necessary.
Okay, my other question is additional revenue streams. What have you explored? Say, jersey sponsors like we see in soccer, for example, have some options like that been talked about yet?
Well, no, not really. We have just focused on getting back to play and not as concerned about the commercial side of things. Obviously, both ticket sales revenues and sponsorships will be affected dramatically with our teams, and we'll have to be creative in how we look at other opportunities for some revenue. But we do not envision commercializing our jerseys. We like the jerseys the way they're presented currently.
And lastly, just follow up on the trade deadline question, which was good. Is it an option that trades would only be allowed within the divisions? For example, if you're playing within the U.S. division, you can only make trades within that division. Has that been discussed or?
Not yet. No, we have not got to that stage in our discussions. I think everyone's just excited that we're going to be playing and getting back to a start of our regular season, and those will be some of the matters I'm sure we'll be addressing as we work through. I don't know. I don't envision that we'll have real restrictions to that extent on trades, but that'll be something we'll be addressing. Not only the timing of some of those decisions and what the deadlines would be, but also whether there will be some uniqueness to some of those regulations for this season.
Hi, Ron. I was just wondering if you could elaborate a bit on what Dr. Naidu's role is going to be with the league and in communication with other clubs and things like that.
His role will be primarily to review our protocols to ensure that the health authorities in each of our jurisdictions are comfortable with those recommended protocols, and to make recommendations on improvements that we need to make in the course of the season, and certainly assist us as we monitor any situations that might arise over the course of the season. So he's a resource for us, someone who we're going to benefit from his experience in this particular area, but in particular will be really very important from the standpoint of determining what our final protocols look like.
And can you speak a bit about his experience? I mean, obviously he brings a pretty good resume to the league with his success at the bubble.
Well, his experience with both NHL and CFL teams goes without saying, and long-time service with both those organizations in Edmonton. But in addition to that, his experience with the NHL as the chief medical person in charge of the bubble or the hub in Edmonton, that immediate experience will be extremely important. And then I think the other thing, of course, he's had a lot of experience dealing at the club level, and will be able to help us with managing situations as they may occur with each of our teams.
Quick one for you, Ron. Have any of the various health authorities in the provinces and states followed the lead of Ontario with respect to no contact, or is that something you haven't had to deal with? It's yet another challenge.
No, we haven't had any comments of that nature come our way. I think everyone understands how we play the game in Western Hockey League, and they're very respectful of that. So we don't envision those types of discussions taking place out west.
In regards to scheduling, this might be a question more for individual teams, but when it comes to buildings like the Art Hauser Center, where there's multiple teams that play in on a regular basis, the Mintos, the Bears, etc., how much are the teams going to be having to work around that a little bit now as those schedules are starting to be finalized as well?
Yeah, I think that it represents some more challenges. Certainly, the protocols will speak to that, and every league and we'll have different approaches to that. And I think our standards, not to suggest that we're that going to be significantly different than what the other leagues would be, but certainly our standards will be high and our expectations will be high with respect to sanitization and disinfections and so forth that we need to take, steps that we need to take with respect to the preparation of our facilities. So the one thing I can tell you is that we've had excellent cooperation from all of our facilities in the Western Hockey League. We've worked hand in hand with them on the return to play protocols, and they've been very cooperative. So I am confident that from a health and safety perspective, our facilities and preparation for our games will be in good shape.
Excellent. And the other question I have is kind of a follow-up to some of the other questions earlier in regards to players going to Junior A. I know some of the prospects, Denton Matejchuk, Connor Geekie, are playing the MJHL. Is their status a little bit different because they're not full-time WHL players yet and they've just coming into the league now? Or is that kind of something that's still being worked on a little bit in terms of those guys?
We're still working through that, but if the player was an affiliated player last year, he's eligible to play Junior A now. It's the roster players from last season that would not be eligible currently, but that's something now that we've established a start date we're going to be looking at and reviewing with our general managers next week.